Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today, with just days now until the election, we're making my final prediction for the 2025 Virginia Lieutenant Governor's race between the Democrat Ghazala Hashmi and the Republican John Reid. Now, this is one of several elections that are up in Virginia. In 2025, I'll be doing the governor's race and attorney general's race in the coming days, but today's video is going to focus on the lieutenant governor's race, one that's kind of being a little bit underreported compared to the gravity of both the governor and attorney general election. So with that said, let's get right into it. The 2025 Virginia Lieutenant Governor election, as of today, the most recent polling data shows Ghazala Hashmi is leading with about 4 points over the Republican John Reid, 48.6% to 44.6% on the polling average from Decision Desk HQ. And when you look at the polling average here and how it's sort of gone, this race is interesting because there's a lot more undecided voters, it seems, in this race than compared to the governor and the, not so much the attorney general, but definitely the governor's race. Where now at this point in time, you've seen in the last few days or so, Hashmi's support has gone up about a point, where she's gone up to 48.6% now, where John Reid's been polling around 44.6%. Now, what's interesting is this race has been talked about as essentially being safe for the Democrats and basically out of reach for the GOP. What's interesting, though, in noticing this, is John Reid's actually outperforming the Republican at the top of the ticket, Winsome Sears, by roughly about 1 point. Now, this actually isn't too out of character for Virginia. Just to give you an idea, in 2017, when the Democrat Ralph Northam won the governor's race by around 9 points, the Democrat Justin Fairfax won his lieutenant governor's race by a little bit over 5.5%. So the lieutenant governor's race was closer in 2017. And then in 2021, Glenn Youngkin ended up winning by around 2% at the governor level. Winsome Sears defeated Democrat Hala Ayala only by about 1.6% or so. So not a very big difference compared to the governor's race, but those were two elections in a row where the lieutenant governor's race was actually closer in margin of victory than the governor's race at the top of the ticket ended up being. So for how this race is looking right now at 48.6 to 44.6, there's more undecided voters at 6.8%. Every single poll has shown Ghazala Hashmi winning except for one from back in September, the Republican-aligned pollster, which is sponsored by Reid's campaign. Every single poll shows Hashmi is going to win. I fully expect that she will, but I don't think it's too much of a surprise that I think this may actually be a smaller margin of victory, potentially, than what the governor's race ends up being. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean Hashmi and the Democrats are in any danger of losing this race. The most recent polling showing Hashmi up 53 to 45 with 2% undecided from A2 Insights, that would be about an 8-point win for Hashmi over John Reid. And right now, I think that's pretty much a good basis of how this race is currently going. Now, that's the only poll where there's about 2% undecideds here. Most of the others have a lot of undecideds still remaining. Christopher Newport University, a popular university in Virginia that's done a lot of polling for a while now, it's a 2-point race, 47-45, but still 7% are undecided in this race. It's sort of a little bit similar to what happened in 2017 in the Virginia gubernatorial election in the polling, where the Democrat Ralph Northam led over the Republican Ed Gillespie, and the numbers were pretty similar to how they are now. Northam had 47.7%, Gillespie had 44.4%, but there were still 8% of people that were undecided at that time. And ultimately, what happened on election day was pretty much all the undecided voters broke heavily for the Democrat Ralph Northam. He got up to 53.9%. Where Ed Gillespie got 44.97%, his numbers only went up about half a percentage point, where Ralph Northam went up another 6 or 7 points or so. So what does this mean for 2025 in the lieutenant governor's race, and why am I making this example? Is because this election environment, especially for Virginia, is looking to be more like 2017 than what 2021 ended up looking like, where it was a Republican win. So when looking at how 2017 broke for the Democrats, I think more likely than not, we're going to see John Reid probably get like 0.5% to 1% of those undecided voters, and the rest would go to Ghazala Hashmi, and that would put this race right around that similar 2017 number of Hashmi getting around 53%, John Reid getting 45%, and there still being about 2% undecided at that current point in time. That could really go either way. It's worth noting also, this is a two-person race, one Democrat, one Republican. There are no third-party votes, so there may be a handful of votes that decide not to vote for either of the two candidates. That always seems to happen in elections, but there won't be a third-party candidate to draw, say, 2 or 3% of the vote away. So the vote should go between Hashmi and Reid, and how it ends up breaking down, I think we see Hashmi end up winning probably by around that 53-45% margin in the polling in this race. Now we'll have to wait and see how it all goes, of course, but what happens in the other races in Virginia could play a very important role as well. Now, I'm going to be going over those races more in depth in future videos as well, but just to give you an idea, is in the governor's race for 2025 in Virginia, you see Abigail Spanberger with a pretty large lead in this race, and not too dissimilar to the final A2 Insights poll, where in this one, Spanberger had 54%, Winsome Sears had 46%, 1% undecided in this one. And based on the rest of the polling that we've seen in this race, 54-46 may potentially even be the Republicans' best case scenario when everything is said and done. So if Abigail Spanberger is winning at the top of the ticket by about 8 or 9 points, I don't think we're going to see too much of a difference between that and the lieutenant governor's race. I think maybe a point to half a point, a little bit of leeway here or there that maybe could change things. But overall, I think we're going to see a very similar result in the governor's race and the lieutenant governor's race as well. The question is going to be ultimately, can John Reid continue to outperform Winsome Sears like he is currently in the polling data by about a point or so? Can he continue to do that? Will that translate on election day? Even if it does, I don't think he's in any real situation where he can win this race. I think Hashmi is going to win, but that's just a polling note that I wanted to point out in this race. And again, just to give you an idea of how this is currently going here, you see Hashmi getting very close to that 50% number, that if everything goes the way it's been going, fully expect Hashmi will win this race. So this one doesn't get talked about too much because it's been pretty consistent, even though it's been decently competitive for the last few months or so. Hashmi has always held a lead in this race over John Reid. The only reason it hasn't been as big as the governor's race is that there's been more undecided vote and seemed less Democratic support shored up behind Hashmi, where Reid's running about a point better than Winsome Sears, but the Democrat seems to be the one that's not totally consolidating support heading into election day. But given how the governor's race is expected to go, I fully expect that will end up going for Ghazala Hashmi when everything is said and done. As for some specifics about the Commonwealth of Virginia and how I think it's going to go at a county level, in 2024, when Kamala Harris defeated Donald Trump by about 5.9, 5.8% in the state, you ended up seeing Suffolk or Chesapeake County being lean Democratic, Virginia Beach being lean Democratic, 2.6% and 3.8%. These two counties, I'm expecting in this race that's going to be larger, obviously, than what it was in 2024. I'm thinking we're looking at a map more similar to 2020, where Joe Biden won 54.1%, Donald Trump got 44, around a 10-point victory or so. You saw likely Democratic wins, albeit narrowly, in Virginia Beach and Chesapeake. I think in this lieutenant governor's race, we're going to see likely Democratic in Chesapeake, probably going to see lean to likely Democrat in Virginia Beach, but then definitely up here in the DC suburbs, where Loudoun was a 25-point win for Biden, 27 points for Biden in Prince William, and 42 almost in Fairfax County. I think these are some percentages, maybe off by a point or two, but I think we're going to see these three DC suburb counties up here vote very heavily for the Democrats, both in this race and all the races in Virginia, but these three, especially in this race, I expect to be very heavy for the Democrat, Ghazala Hashmi. So obviously, if you've been watching this video, you know the way I'm leaning with this. For Hashmi versus John Reid, my final prediction of the 2025 election cycle for this race is I expect Ghazala Hashmi to win. Now, the overall margin in which I expect her to win by are as follows. 1 point and under is considered tilt. 1 to 5 point margin of victory is considered lean. 5 to 15 point is considered likely, and 15 or more is considered safe. So by those rankings, I would have this race listed as likely Democratic, where I'm projecting right now right around that 8.5 to 9 point victory for Ghazala Hashmi over John Reid in this race. I also have very similar to the governor's race as well on those same numbers. I think we're probably going to see this race be about half a percentage point less in terms of margin of victory towards the Republican, meaning I think John Reid will do about a half point better than Winsome Sears. I think that's a real polling situation that's happening. I think that will continue on election night, but I don't think that's going to put this race in a competitive nature at all. But I think we're going to see Ghazala Hashmi defeat John Reid by around 8 to 8.5%, and ultimately we're going to have a Democrat be the lieutenant governor of Virginia for the next 4 years, along with potentially a Virginia Democrat as governor as well. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe. If you did, stay tuned over the next few days, because I'll be going over all the major 2025 races that are up and giving my final predictions in those races that I know you're not going to want to miss out on. Thank you so much for watching. Hope to see you in a future video.